Good evening. I'm Dagan McDowell.
And I'm Sean Duffy. Welcome to The Bottom Line.
80 years ago, courageous young men took on a mission to charge and fight against tyranny, an undertaking unparalleled in human history, willing to sacrifice their lives so we, the world, could be free. D-Day.
156,000 Allied forces landed in Normandy that day, including 73,000 Americans. 2,501 American heroes were killed during the invasion, and we are forever grateful for their sacrifice.
Today, we're reflecting on their heroism and courage and those very sacrifices that have been made and where our country is headed. 40 years ago, President Ronald Reagan famously honored the young men of D-Day and why they fought.
These are the men who took the cliffs. These are the champions who helped free a continent. And these are the heroes who helped end a war. You were young the day you took these cliffs. Some of you were hardly more than boys with the deepest joys of life before you. Yet you risked everything here. Why? Why did you do it? Well, what impelled you to put aside the instinct for self-preservation and risk your lives to take these cliffs? What inspired all the men of the armies that met here? We look at you and somehow we know the answer. It was faith and belief. It was loyalty and love.
In the 40 years since that speech, America's leadership is in question, not just here at home, but also on the world stage.
Our current commander-in-chief was in Normandy today, but couldn't let the moment pass without throwing in a jab at our nation, highlighting the injustice of the past.
Oh, the battle raged. Every soldier who stormed the beach, who dropped by parachute or landed by glider, every sailor who manned the thousands of ships and landing craft, every aviator who destroyed German-controlled airfields, bridges, and railroads, all were backed by other brave Americans, including hundreds of thousands of people of color and women who courageously served despite unjust limitations on what they could do for their nation.
With a leader like that, is it any wonder that our veterans, American patriots, no longer recognize this country?
I feel like a foreigner in my own country lots of times, and I don't like it. It makes my heart real heavy. And I just hope we can pull out of this. There's too much Hollywood going on in Washington all the time. The important subjects they don't cover. So the thing is, I hope that I hope all the guys will rally up and we'll go back and straighten it all out.
Joining us now, Medal of Honor recipient, Army Staff Sergeant David Bellavia, Army Master Sergeant Tim Kennedy, both live from Normandy, along with Fox News contributor and Marine veteran, Staff Sergeant Joey Jones. Pardon me if I get misty. I spent the day watching old footage of Dwight David Eisenhower revisiting the beaches of Normandy. David, and I'm going to call you David if that's okay, Staff Sergeant, 20 years after the D-Day landing. Just tell people what it was like to be there today, 80 years on, from all those sacrifices.
I mean, it's like going to Gettysburg with participants. You know, like it's crazy. These men, and you know what? The oldest in our group was 107. The youngest was, you know, in his late 90s, and even they're just beautiful old men. They smile, they laugh, and then they get here, and they're right back to 1944, and you realize what enemies of America were up against. And man, it makes you so proud. You know, I don't know. They talk about, do you celebrate 80 years? Do you commemorate? I celebrate it because 9,000 men gave their lives. I'm forever grateful to them. And those men who survived and came home to tell us their stories, we're better off for having them.
You know, Tim, if they go back to Normandy and they go back to that moment, I can only imagine that's what happens. But they also have to think about what's happened to the country here at home. And they think about probably the sacrifices they made and the brothers that didn't come home with them, that made the ultimate sacrifice. And they got to be a bit perplexed of where the country sits today after the sacrifices that they made.
Yeah, no doubt. It's there's a stark contrast right now. Everywhere that we go here, they're celebrating the sacrifice, the dedication, the commitment, the discipline that these men made, and what they did on June 6, 1944. Just imagine being a French person. You've been under Nazi occupation, and then you look up, and for the first time in your life, across the blue sky, you see canopies. You see American paratroopers coming down with one purpose, which is to liberate. And this is when we say that America is the greatest country to ever exist. It's because of actions like this. And yeah, we went to the moon, but these men specifically, they climbed cliffs at Point du Hoc. They stormed beaches at Omaha, Utah, and they freed a nation. They freed a continent from tyranny. And that is what America is capable of.
Joey, you're here at home. And Tim mentioned even to this day, the French, because they had been living under Nazi rule for some years, they are just overjoyed to see these Americans returning. And how can we take that and remember it here and treat those in service to this nation with the same respect and joy and embrace, and bring that to future generations who are willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom?
Well, first of all, let me say, just being on here with Tim and David is a big deal for me, because they're both guys that I look up to. I mean, what they've done in their service to this country does honor by the greatest generation and continues a legacy. But to that question, the way I view this day, what I've thought about all day today, is that these men, boys mostly, we kind of idolize the Vikings because they say they burned their ships so they couldn't go back. If you landed on that beach, you had nowhere to go but towards the fire. There was nowhere else to hide. There was nowhere else to go. You couldn't go back on the boat. You couldn't go back in the water. You had to go forward, and they did it willingly. And all I thought about all day today was those men came home from war, from winning the war. And what did they do? They built this country into a superpower. They didn't talk and complain about what the country owed them, about what they don't get. They needed more in the way of mental health services and things like that. But they went to work. They went to work on Wall Street. They went to work on Main Street. They built buildings. They built towns. They built roads. They literally built this country. If you look at the 1950s and the explosion of economy and just society, they came home, and it wasn't about what their country owed them. It was about what they could go do, the life they could go build for themselves, void of most of the benefits that the three of us have the opportunity to take advantage of. And I'm not saying that those benefits are bad or we shouldn't have them. I'm glad we do. I advocate for them. But this generation is the greatest generation, starting with winning that war and going through the last 80 years of keeping this country around. I mean, you think about what we went through in the 60s. You think about what we went through in the 70s. I mean, the 90s might have been the last decent decade we had when it comes to wartime, and we won a conflict during the 90s. So, I mean, for 40 years after they came home, it was pretty much chaos in this country for one reason or the other. Yet there they are, here they are, still investing in us. They're the first veterans to tell us thank you. They're the first veterans to tell us we don't get enough. And all I can do is look in their eyes and say, when do we ever see this again? And hopefully it's not unless we get punched in the face again. And that's what they took. Yep. They took a time when we weren't even a superpower, and they made us one.
No doubt. David, we really shouldn't be shocked anymore by Hillary Clinton, and yet here we are. Her first post on X today wasn't about honoring heroes. Instead, she took the moment to focus on the election. Quote, 80 years ago today, thousands of brave Americans fought to protect democracy on the shores of Normandy this November. All we have to do is vote. I mean, she is shameless. As we talk about those young men, and you guys mentioned boys, getting off these ships into enemy fire, most of them knowing they're going to give their lives. And she has the audacity to disrespect their memories in this day by trying to play politics for Joe Biden in opposition to Donald Trump.
Well, let's be fair. Hillary's had a rough 8 years. Okay, it hasn't been easy. This isn't. But look, this generation has taught us so much. You got a colleague over there in Joey Jones who's given more than. That's an American warrior. He's given up his quality of life. He did that for me. He did that for my friends. He did it for you and everyone watching this show. Tim Kennedy's over there with that crazy haircut. He jumped out of a perfectly good C-47, put his life at risk to honor the 82nd Airborne and the 101st. That's my generation. That's my family. We're the warrior generation that we are because we learned those lessons from D-Day. And unfortunately, Hillary's just having a bad day.
Yeah. Yeah. And well, now we know. We remember. Thank you for reminding us, Hillary, why you lost to Donald Trump. But Sean, I want to bring this up, Tim. Sean said talk about storming the beaches, but I'm glad that David said jumping out of perfectly good airplanes to, because there were a lot of men, young guys, who jumped out of perfectly decent airplanes to start the invasion that day. And Dwight David Eisenhower, when asked what worried him the most on D-Day, it was the airdrop on the Cotentin Peninsula to open up Utah Beach. That was his biggest concern that very day.
Yeah, it's now having done this for 80 years, seeing canopies in the air isn't anything new. But June 6, 1944, this was something entirely new. No one had read about it. No one had seen it on television. Nobody read about their great-grandfather doing it. There wasn't a sport. There wasn't, celebrities going into it. These were young boys that, in some instances painted their face like warriors, like American native warriors, and jumped out with one intent, which was to free an entire continent. And, the incredible guts, they took the courage, they flung it over their shoulder, and they jumped out of an airplane after handing a little yellow rope off to a man in front of them. It's characteristic of why we recognize and have to acknowledge how extraordinary these men were. They're just plain built different. I will aspire for the rest of my life. Oscar Wilde is kind of quoted in saying that imitation is the best form of flattery. And to celebrate the greatness of it is our mediocrity. But I want to celebrate them every way that I can. I want to imitate them in every way. And I hope that every American can look at these men that jumped out of airplanes for the purpose of liberating people that they've never met before, so that they can be free and try to imitate that. Please, all day long. America, imitate these people.
Well said. And by the way, Tim, I do like your haircut. It's a beautiful haircut. Well done. I disagree, David.
He's emulating what his hair was cut like that some years ago. So this is Tim retro, actually.
It is fine. All right, Joy.
Keeping you up to date. I stalked him on social media.
It looks good. All right, I want to go to this because, Joy, new polling out today shows a stark generational divide over views of just how great America really is. The vast majority of voters age 65 and older, 91%, say America is one of, if not the greatest countries on the planet. Once you look at ages 35 to 49, that drops to just 74%. And if you go even younger, to the 18 to 34-year age group, only 60% recognize America's greatness. And I want to get your take on why this is, Joy, but also I wonder if you teach your kids in their schools to hate their country and to hate their forefathers, maybe this is what you get. They don't love their country. Joey?
No, you're absolutely right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And what bothers me about this is there's probably many reasons why some of these people feel this way. If you're living in a life where you don't feel like you can make it financially, I can see why you might feel that way. But for most of these, it's simply this idea, you watch these street interviews where people don't understand why, the Palestinians don't celebrate Pride Month. They don't know that. They literally are ignorant to cultures around the world and the oppressive nature of the majority of them. Regardless of your stance on those cultures, when you look at America, we're not free because we inherited it. We're free because somebody fought and died for it. But when you have something from birth, it's hard to appreciate it. And that's the biggest thing here is all the wars that we fought so our homeland could remain free, but in remaining free and untouched, we get spoiled. And that's where we are. We're a spoiled people. We're spoiled in our resources, we're spoiled in our freedoms, and we're really spoiled in our appreciation for it. I don't hate them for it. I'm not mad at them for it. I just hope they grow older and learn.
Yep. Thank you, gentlemen. I made it through without becoming a puddle. Well, sort of. Staff Sergeant David Bellavia, Master Sergeant Tim Kennedy, and Staff Sergeant Joey Jones. Gentlemen, thank you for everything that you do and have done for all of us every day.
We are grateful for your service.